morning everyone. It is 2 weeks and 1 day until my Viva today, and it has suddenly dawned on me that I am absolutely insane agreeing to film the lead up to my Viva. I'm suddenly so nervous. I really hope that everything goes according to plan and I haven't just kind of documented my failure. Anyway, today I am starting full-on preparation for my Viva. It's a little bit tricky because my Viva falls 3 days into my new job. So I teach on Monday and Tuesday, my first lessons for 2 subjects, and then I have my Viva on Wednesday. So I've currently been splitting my time between teaching prep and Viva prep, but today I'm devoting the whole day to Viva prep. I'm starting the big read through. So everyone says the best Viva preparation is to read through your thesis really, really carefully. My plan is to read through the whole thing from cover to cover and then go back and read the introduction one more time, as people say that your examiners tend to concentrate the most upon the introduction. Today's plan is to get through the introduction and chapters 1 and 2. Fingers crossed I can do it. I'm ready to go. Okay, it is now 12:30. I'm about to break to have some lunch, and I have so far read my introduction and my first chapter of my thesis. Probably doesn't sound like an awfully complex task that I've got ahead of me, just kind of reading over my thesis, but it's actually really time-consuming reading through everything really carefully, and it's mentally taxing going through everything so carefully. I'm finding it quite cringeworthy as well. Already there's things in my introduction which I'm like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that. Oh, I'm quite embarrassed that my examiners are reading that. Just sometimes when I'm being a little bit too forthright about what I think I'm doing differently. And I think maybe it might have worked in my favour if I was a little bit more meek. Okay, so it is now 4:45 and I have just finished reading chapter 2, so I'm really happy with my progress today. It's quite unusual that I have met my goal before 4 o'clock, so I'm going to try and make the most of that and have a coffee and keep reading. It's now 6 o'clock and I am halfway through the 3rd chapter of my thesis. I'm really, really pleased with how far I've come today. As you can see, I'm looking a bit disheveled after reading all day. I'm feeling exhausted and I'm definitely going to call it quits there. It's been a tough day, really. I know it probably seems that I'm just doing very easy, mundane things, reading over the thesis, but when you're writing it, you're so embedded within it and you're so passionate about it and ready to defend the thesis to the hilt. But once you've had a bit of space from it, suddenly it starts to become a lot more difficult to be so confident with it, and all of a sudden you start to see it in a different light, and it's quite stressful reading it like that. Good morning and welcome back to the second part of the vlog. It's now Thursday, 1 week and 6 days until I submit my thesis, and I'm out walking. Can you see him? My little dachshund Marcel. Then I'm off home to finish reading the thesis. So I'm reading the second half of 3 and chapters 4 and 5 and the conclusion today. Wish me luck, it's a lot of work. Okay, it is now 11:15 and I am finally up to chapter 4. It struck me actually as I've been reading just now that this kind of period prepping for the Viva is A, quite weird, but B, most like actually just starting a PhD. It's like you kind of end where you begin, because when you're first starting a PhD, essentially you spend a lot of time just in the library reading, just going over all the literature and making sure you work out how your ideas are positioned in relation to that kind of wider pool of scholarship. And I don't know if I've been kind of at a stage since that beginning period where I have just been reading all day. So it's quite bizarre, but whereas when you first start a PhD, you have very little direction and you're just kind of drowning in this sea of scholarship. Now I have a lot of direction and a lot of pressure on me, so it's quite weird seeing the kind of evolution in the full circle. Okay, it is literally just gone 1:30 and I have just turned the page for the beginning of chapter 5, finally, my last chapter. My brain feels like utter mush, but You know, I am getting through the thesis, I'm hitting my schedule, which is quite rare. Usually I'm running behind schedule, and I'm just making lots of notes about the most important bits, the vague bits, the kind of page numbers with quotes that I really should memorize, so if something comes up in the Viva, I know exactly where to turn. I definitely don't think this is wasted effort. It is quite monotonous, and it is quite hard working home alone, no one to talk to, on just one task for such a long period of time, but I'm getting through it. I've realised I'm not going to get through this final chapter without another coffee, so I'm heading out, getting a bit of fresh air and a caffeine hit. It's now 6:15 and I've just finished reading my conclusion. I'm really happy that I've managed to finish reading everything today, so I'm going to sign off the vlog here, do a couple of emails, and then maybe have a glass of wine. For those who are watching not in the UK, you might wonder why I'm putting in these really long hours in the lead up to the Viva. The Viva is kind of a peculiarity of the UK system, because in the States, for example, it's more of a celebratory event where your friends and family are invited, and in countries like Australia there isn't even a Viva, you just get an examiner report in the post. In the UK, however, a lot rides on it, and according to my supervisor, often examiners won't have made up their mind about what grade to give the thesis until they've actually sat through the Viva and talked to the candidate. So they might have a recommendation, they might go into the Viva thinking that they are minded to pass with minor corrections or something like that, but actually the exact way in which you will pass, whether it's minor corrections, major corrections or no corrections, is often determined by the candidate's answers to the questions in the Viva. So it's really important to take it very seriously and to put in all these long hours, which might be a bit boring and monotonous, but hey, hopefully it will help me pass in the end. I will look forward to coming back to you next week for another vlog in which I'm going to focus a bit more on my new job, what I'm doing to get ready for the new job, and how I ended up getting a job before I'd finished my PhD, you know, just a couple of weeks before the Viva. Thanks for joining me. I'll look forward to speaking to you then. Bye for now.